All right, this is Sacred Frames. Jeff Cook, Sean Palmer, the Movie Mike Yeager. We're talking about Sinners. Finally, it was promised, delivered today.
Yes,
we're
we
going.
deliver. It is no longer spooky season, but we're going to get into it anyway.
Right, well, Sinners was not released during spooky
That's
season,
true.
so I feel like we have some. I guess it should have been, since no one went to see any movie at all last month, apparently. Like the worst box office month, what, in history, or like since
Really?
2015 or something. Yeah, it was bad. So as well as Sinners did coming out in the spring, if it had come out last month, it would have crushed.
We are not going to doomsay the theatrical experience on this podcast, Sean. We're not going to talk about what didn't work. We're going to talk about what did work, which in this case is Ryan Coogler's Sinners, a genuine phenomenon of 2025 and likely to figure into continued conversation as we lead into the end of the year and award stock and all that jazz. You want to go?
If I were one of the movie bros that were excelling one battle after another as the greatest cinematic achievement of the last decade, I too would not want to box office shade anybody, since that movie made less money than my dog on a walk last week. It did nothing, and yet it got made, and Thomas Anderson's next movie will also get made.
I will not have you guys continue to drag Paul Thomas Anderson into the next episode.
In our text thread, I have come around to a little bit and gotten a little bit more positive. So no dragging from me. I'm trajectory is more toward up and to the left.
It's a grower.
We have missed the spooky season, but we are starting Oscar buzz. Mike, you got the summary of this movie?
Sure. Let's take it away. So we are in Clarksdale, Mississippi. The year is 1932, the heart of the Great Depression. And we pick up with twin bootleggers, Smoke and Stack, Elias and Elijah. They are have come back home from their time in Chicago. It seems like they are maybe outrunning the various mobs that they may or may have not pitted against one another. And they are home in order to purchase a sawmill that they are going to open up as a juke joint for the community. And along the way, we meet Sammy, Preacher Boy. I guess we start out with Preacher Boy, I should say, who arrives, broken guitar in hand, Sunday morning to church, already in session, walking in. His father is the preacher, sees him bloodied up with this broken guitar, and then we flash backward to see the day preceding these events, which is, as you know, someone will say later on, the best day of their life and many of their lives, that turns very quickly into a harrowing ordeal for all involved. And so this is a movie about community and the blues and cultural appropriation and lots of stuff. There's so many shades to get into. So we got a lot. Let's not waste any more time. Where do you want to start off, Jeff?
Actually, I love what you just said there in terms of what is this movie about? Is it about a lot of things, or is it about something more singular?
It feels to me that it's about a lot of things. And it wants to put sort of a racial conversation, 1930s, Mississippi. That's going to be the heartbeat of it. And as the resident born in Mississippian on this podcast, I have a lot to say about what Mississippi is actually like. That's a tough needle to thread for this reason. Sometimes something can be about a lot of things and it end up being nothing. And sometimes it can be a lot of things and be about a lot of things. And Sinners manages to be about a lot of things and be a lot of things, so you don't lose the thread. So you've got questions of race and culture. You've got vampirism, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and how Coogler is using vampirism to talk about race and culture. You've got music and the power of music. You've got interracial relationships going on in this. You've also got not just black-white racism. You've got what Asians are experiencing. And then you have got Smoke and Stack, right? They are soldiers. Like, they went and fought in a war and came back home. And what has their experience been like? Obviously, you got the Ku Klux Klan makes an appearance in the movie. And so Coogler sets out and does something very ambitious, which is why, Jeff, it's got so much Oscar buzz. And I'm actually starting to wonder if it's getting the right kind of Oscar buzz for the right reasons. So it's about a lot, and it maintains being about a lot.
That actually helps me. That's all really well stated, Sean. I think if I were to center in on one key theme, what this film is about, I think it's about whose stories get to be told and who gets to tell those stories. That would be my one sentence as a compliment.
I agree that this is a lot of topics, but the extra topics I think come out of the primary topic, which is really living into cultural identity as a place of stability and healing, and seeing that culture stolen or appropriated. The nature of evil in this movie, I think, is very interesting. But a lot of the extra topics, I think, are kind of overtones, the resonances that kind of spin off of that. And so, being a white guy from Colorado, I'm super interested in hearing what I'm missing, which I'm sure is a lot in terms of what's being communicated by the director here. I want to start with the twins and with Preacher Boy as characters, because in just kind of what they represent, what their paths are, I think if we get into their stories, what's being told there, that a lot of the elements of the film is really going to come forward. So what do you all see when you think of the story of these two twins? What stands out to you most?
Okay, I'm going to start with my critique, because I just have to say this. As someone born in Mississippi and raised in Mississippi and lived almost exclusively in the American South for my life, Michael B. Jordan does a great job in this movie. He's got to carry two roles. I joke that it's Michael A. Jordan and Michael B. Jordan. But his Southern accent is horrible in this movie. It's absolutely terrible. And so is Haley Steinfeld. Their Southern accents are god awful in this movie. And there's nothing more offensive. I know you guys are Colorado guys. You spend a lot of time of your life in Colorado. Like, there's nothing more offensive to someone from the South than someone doing a bad Southern accent, because it's hard to get over the assumption that they are trying to sound stupid. And
Fair.
People equate Southern accent with stupid. I know folks like Bill Simmons and others mock movies like Quiz Show, where people have Boston accents. And I totally get why, because it is insulting. So I want to start there. That's my main criticism of the movie, which is pretty light criticism.
Everything else Mississippi held up?
Yeah, pretty much. It's hot. It's dry. People are racist. That's Mississippi.
I think that more broadly, I mean, this is really talking about the first movement of the film. I mean, we have this long lead up to, put a pin in the arrival of the antagonists. But this first hour, 45 minutes, what have you, of the film, I think is just really stunning. It's my favorite chapter of the film as a whole. Just the world building, the relationships. You get a sense of these two men having gone off to parts unknown, and they are coming home in some ways out of a lack of options. Like their paths are kind of closing in on them. And so there is that element of fleeing, but there is also just so much about this return. Both of them have these important women in their lives. Smoke with Annie and Stack with Mary, and these are very complex and layered relationships that I think are embodied really beautifully by Michael B. Jordan in both cases. I think Haley Steinfeld as Mary, and my favorite performance perhaps in the film, Wunmi Masaku, who plays Annie, just brings such an authenticity, the verisimilitude of the production. I mean, even in the credits, they've got, Southern gambling consultants and hoodoo consultants and all of those details. The world is just so rich with observation. It's a place that you really love to be. And I think that's what really sells it on this place that that Smoke and Stack have come back to, perhaps despite their better judgment, because as they tell Sammy in the car, like, Chicago ain't shit else but Mississippi with tall buildings. It is functionally the same thing. They realize that everything they thought was out there was not. This post racial lie of this world in which they continue to inhabit. And so how do we return home and make something that is of ours and for us and our little piece of this world that has clearly made it clear they don't want us here?
And I want to say that actually holds up. Like, Wumi Masaku's character, like, my grandmother took me to someone who does hoodoo when I was a child. And my grandmother, by all accounts, would say that she was a Christian. It seems like, if you're not from that world, that seems weird or strange. And it might be if you're not from that world. But, like, that actually happens. Like, that's a real thing. And there is a kind of syncretism around all of that is very real for those characters. So one of the things I think that Coogler does really well is that he actually constructs a world where we're going to meet vampires, right? But a world that actually exists.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty remarkable. And while we're talking about Wumi Masaku, I would also like to say one of the reasons this movie has been heralded in the Black community is that you have someone who looks like Michael Jordan, who is just enamored and in love with someone who looks like Wumi Masaku. Like, and the thing is, like, women are saying, like, oh, she is a Black woman. Like, I don't think most people realize or remember her from Loki or Deadpool and Wolverine, where she got, where probably most people who watch television and films first met her. Mm-hmm. And she is as stunning in this movie as is Haley Steinfeld, right? And that is what Coogler gets right, and what he so often gets right, and is why we need diverse filmmakers, is that diverse filmmakers show their community as they really are, not as the majority community thinks or assumes that they are. So when I watch this, and like Jamie Lawson as character as well, like, I know these people, like I have known these people and people like them my entire life. And so it feels, for a movie that is about vampires, it is the most grounded movie about vampires that I've ever encountered.
The thing that struck me, especially being a white guy outside this culture, is it seems to me that the director does want to have you understand the twins through the two lovers. As a white guy who's just separate from this culture, the Annie character strikes me as an embodiment of the maternal Black past, even like a longer heritage. She's embodying so much of the rich culture in herself, in her space, in some of the things that she says about her own suffering and pain. That I find very interesting, intriguing, and seem to be, he is attracted to this. And the Mary character, I feel like I can't speak to what's going on there. It feels like there's something that the director wants to say through the Mary character, which I'd love to invite. The one thing I want to say about the twins that I thought was interesting is that Elijah is a Jewish name, which you guys will know. Mm-hmm. Elias is the same name. I don't know if you caught this, but Elias is the New Testament Greek translation of Elijah. So if you go to the Koine Greek, Elias is how it's translated in the New Testament. And we're going to talk about assimilation. We're going to talk about appropriation. We're going to talk about like how a culture takes somebody else's culture. And I assume that that's on purpose, that this has been
only on
European.
Sacred Frames would you get Hebrew and Greek.
That's pretty good.
Let
me tell you.
But it's there, and I bet you it's intentional.
Oh, 100%. So maybe this will be helpful. My dad, who was born in 1947, has lived most of his life in Mississippi. I think now that I think about it, maybe except for 3 months, has lived in Mississippi, lived through the civil rights movement. And he tells the story. I mean, this is his reflection. During the desegregation of schools, people out protesting desegregation of schools because they did not want black children going to school with their white children. Mm-hmm. And my dad says the joke was that everybody knew that black children are already going to school with your white children. And I think this is what Coogler is getting at with Mary. Because she does more than passes. And we all know what passing is, like black folks who are light-skinned enough that they look just kind of exotic, but they can pass as white. And I think what Coogler is trying to say is that throughout the history of this country, there have been these interracial children who, one, had to navigate which culture they wanted to be a part of and live inside of. But it is just a part of who we are as a people. Like this idea that this was never going on, and it's always been like insidious. So it's Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, all the way down. You know, the joke about Thomas Jefferson, as people come to have dinner at Monticello, would be like a lot of his slaves really seemed to resemble him, right?
Shocking.
Yeah. And so, and that's why after his death, he sets her free. That was like one of the, so I think Coogler is getting at that. Like, we all know that this has happened. It's not new. And it puts both characters in precarious positions because they cannot both express and live with the truth, even though everyone knows what the truth is. I don't know. Y'all's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is encoded within the casting of Haley Steinfeld, and I think that some of the it may have even been rewritten somewhat to account for this, because what is stated in the film is actually her ethnicity. I believe it's her mother's father was half black and half Filipino. She comes from Ashkenazi Jews on her father's side, so there is this mix within this community that is reflective of her understanding of a similar kind of othering, and so she has, and also I think that because of the nature of where the story goes, like there is that knowledge of someone who has learned how to play both sides. And that becomes very important for her for reasons that will be obvious. But when someone inquires later on in the film, why is she allowed to be in there in the juke with everybody else? And Annie doesn't miss a moment. No, she's here because she's family. And that does actually supersede the racial component, but it also very much includes the racial component, and that can't be that's not something you can as with Remick and these other characters that come in, you can't just appropriate it. You have to have lived it to some degree, which Mary
which
has.
is so funny because what ushers in kind of the late second act, early third act is that Remick shows up and Mary volunteers to go out to talk to them, and she says they're more likely to talk to me than they are to talk to you. And so she has learned over the course of her life both what the restrictions and the privileges are of her racial identity, even though it's hidden behind this really horrible Southern accent. She knows how to monitor and walk through it really well. But then, that term's pretty deadly because she can so easily move between both worlds, which brings me to the question of code switching, because Mary is the active avatar of what it is to code switch. And so if you don't have to navigate living in two worlds between races, you don't know what it is to code switch. And the memes and reels that friends of mine send me all the time about when Black people forget to code switch at work. And for folks who, they are plentiful. There's one way that Black people talk when they're around white people, and it's a different way when they're around other Black people. And that's got nothing to do with African American vernacular English necessarily. I mean, some of it does, but that's not all of it. And she's able to do both, but then that gets leveraged in a particular way where it should have been helpful, but it ends up being deadly. So yeah, I think Mary is a really pivotal character, even though when you watch it a second time, she doesn't get that much screen time, really.
It's true.
But she is a hinge for what happens in the film.
Before we get too much further, let's roll back, and I think we need to include Preacher Boy in this conversation as well, in the lead up to the juke. So we have Sammy, and this opens up a whole other conversation. So Sammy is the son of literally the son of a preacher man, and he walks in that morning that these events begin, and his father has taken his guitar to the church where he knows that Sammy will be looking for it, and he says that Sammy he asks if Sammy's going to be ready to preach that next morning, and he tells him the chapter and verse, 1 Corinthians 10, and very interestingly and very importantly to me, Sammy starts reciting it and then closes the book and continues reciting the remainder of the verse. And it's all about the manner in which God will test us and see us through this trial of endurance. And also it's in that very passage where he talks about the nature of do all things to the glory of God. And so there is this tension with Sammy of he has gone out before sunrise and he has picked his quota of cotton before the day has even begun, because he knows this is the day where he has been working and toiling, and he just wants one day to be free. And his father, the preacher, is saying, no, you belong in the church, in that tension of religiosity and liberation, and where is this spiritual power emanating from is a really fascinating question in this film, because it's not the prayer and the worship songs that cause the demons to reel back. It's actually Annie. Like her hoodoo is the one that works, and it says it earlier as because she and Smoke have, we find out, faced this great loss in their life, the loss of their child. And it's inferred that this is one of the reasons why Smoke had fled. And he's, says to her, well, you do all this, this hoodoo, why didn't it work for our baby? And she says, I don't know, but it worked for you. And he continues to have this necklace around his neck as this totem. And, I'm going to stop there because I know there's just a lot, because Remick weaponizes the language of the church. It's it's all over in the fear mongering of the preacher father. Thoughts there, guys?
Big thoughts for me was that the picture of Christianity is very, very thin throughout. Anytime that there's like spiritual songs sung from that vantage point, either in the church or by the Irish trio later, they just don't have power. But so much of this movie is about the power of music and its way of connecting us to our past, and especially its ability to heal us. And Preacher Boy is not just, Sammy the Preacher Boy. He happens to be the finest blues player in all the Delta. And that placement of his introduction of his name ends up being very important. His heart for what he sees in the music matters. The thing that kept hitting me throughout the movie is something to the effect of all truth is God's truth. And so when you find something that has real power, you should honor it in those spaces. And that's why I think the movie really brings out is folks encountering the divine and healing in community and family and places that are specifically characterized by the music. But it's clear that he doesn't see power in his dad's church, and I assume it's the case that his dad's own power has been stripped because he's embraced, that culture, that he's become less of a man because of his own path. That was my take on that.
Yeah, it's super fascinating because you get the conversation later in the film when I think it's Smoke is talking to Preacher Boy, and he's trying to warn him off of ever playing in a juke joint again. And he says, I've known a lot of blues musicians in my life. I've never known any that were happy, right? But then what do you get toward the end of the movie is that once we have entered into the peak, the denouement of the movie, what does Preacher Boy do? Like, where does he return? Like he returns to his father's church. And so there is always both the trope and the reality that when we have discovered in life, what we most often do as humans is return. We return differently. We return with new insight. It's Ricoeur's hermeneutics of suspicion, right? Like the whole hermeneutical loop. Like you reach a second naivete, but you have to go through some stuff to go like, okay, now I see. Like the first naivete was stuff that I couldn't live with that being a reality, but now I can accept it as a reality in a particular way or in a certain way. So it's not like Preacher Boy at the end of the film gets on a bus and leaves and abandons, even though he does ultimately go on to new things in his life. But before he does that, he does return to his father and to the church, and not in a saccharine way or an unrealistic way, but almost in a coming full circle. Like we have to come full circle in order to leave. Does that make sense? And there's some of that going on.
But what's he clutching in that car as he, drives away from Clarksdale?
Yeah,
like it's not his Bible. Well,
so I thought about this
guitar.
Because in Bono's book Surrender, he talks about this crisis after a couple of albums. They signed a 3-album deal. He talks about this crisis that he and Edge went through about whether or not they should become a Christian band, and their manager at the time said, how would your God feel about you breaking a contract that you signed? Right. And there is this point, I think, that that we all have to get to. Our commitments mean using our gifts in a certain way that may not on the front end seem like it's being used in the way that it's being used. Like I talk with people all the time who left the business that we all went into, ministry, to do something else. And they will tell me constantly, I do way more ministry doing this thing than I ever did, clocking in at a church. And so I'm wondering for Preacher Boy, is that a part? It's Charlie Parker, right? Drug addict, but doing it for the glory of God, like playing in clubs for the glory of God. And I do think it just kind of opens the aperture for us about what it is that we do vocationally and who we do it for, and whether the receiver has to know that that's why we do it in order for it to be valid to do it for that reason. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's spot on. He is still Preacher Boy when he's old. Mm-hmm. He fulfilled that identity in a way that his father wouldn't recognize, but he certainly is doing that business of bringing healing to others. And it may be the case, all three of us have or are in ministry. The idea that you've never met a happy musician could likewise perhaps be said of the
pastors,
the pastors. In exactly the same way.
It's stated in the it's stated in the very opening prologue narration of the film that this gift of the music can connect to not only the ancestors, but it can connect into the future. So it's You know, it's where have we come from and where are we going? And so for Preacher Boy, like that is a very real ministry in a sense through that artistry to be able to be this present conduit to both the days past and the days yet to come. That, you know, I think that's what all artists are hoping to, you know, to happen upon, these moments of transcendence. I would say that that's the goal of a preacher, is to stand in the middle of the past and the present, and to be that sort of bridge, a narrative connection that reminds us who we are and where we collectively are going. And so I think that the film does, you know, cause us to question and to not be so quick to invalidate these gifts as somehow less spiritual because of the avenues, you know, in which they happen to be performed.
Well, you know what, Mike, that probably what you said there makes the most sense of the most controversial scene in the movie, which is when Preacher Boy starts to play in the middle of the juke joint, and suddenly we get this expanse through history.
Bootsy Collins shows up.
Yeah, and it's like, this has nothing to do with vampires outside. You know, the hordes are at the gate. It has nothing to do with any of that. You know, some people think that scene is absolutely stunning and great and very moving and poetic. You're one of them. On first watch, I found it so annoying because it felt to me like being pulled out of the story into, I'm all glad for my preachers to preach. I don't like my music or my movies or my books to preach. And even with my preachers, I want them to tell it slant. I want to get the aha, come around, like do something artistic that makes me go, oh. And that felt on first viewing heavy-handed, but it is also, I mean, there's something to be said about music being this force in the world that draws both the light and the dark forces to it. And because so much of this film is about co-opting the light, both in Remnick's use of the language of the church and Preacher Boy's dad, they are both doing the same thing. They are both trying to co-opt the light for their own purposes, which is power over a community, right? They both want power over a community. And so that might be the best explanation of why that scene is important, because narratively, except for Remick hearing the music, it serves no purpose. Like, except for Remick being drawn to the music, it serves no purpose in the narrative. And so you might have articulated why it's important.
Well, narratively, I would agree it's not terribly important. Cinematically, it's incredibly important. Like, you know, we've been talking about who gets to tell these stories, and here is Ryan Coogler, like, cashing in the blank check from Creed, from, you know, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and getting to make this film on this scale. You know, I drove with my sister-in-law all the way to Dallas just so we could see it on 70 millimeter.
And everyone should know, this is something that Mike just does every now and then. Mike just drives to Dallas, the worst drive in the history from Houston to Dallas. And this is not abnormal for Mike to do.
No, and so this is a moment where you know, he gets to just lay it all out, and so it is this it is audacious and transporting, and it begins with, you know, everything we're talking about. It starts with like this interlude where Delta Slim, the like always unheralded, constantly disrespected Delroy Lindo, who says he says the blues wasn't forced on us like that religion, right? We brought this from home. Like, this is our soul that then gets to be expressed, and to have that then be intercut with, you know, Pop and Locken, and I, you know, even like Misty Copeland, you know, Firebird, you know, Ballerina, like it is just the way that the manner in which it's choreographed and depicted. It is meant to be this expressive kind of transcendent, like, act of liberation, collective liberation, and it serves just beautifully in that way. And then, of course, the camera falls upon the eyes of Remick. You know, we're getting very close into spoiler movies. This is a vampire movie, and his eyes are just alit with like hunger, and it's all about like, no, that is mine to consume. And yeah, I don't think we get that turn as pointedly without, just that this day of community and togetherness, and just the authenticity of, again, just being among family, and we don't have to put on airs. And this is where it has come to in this kind of grand dance where everyone is just, for this moment, free, even temporally, free across, time and space.
This idea of one night, smoke and stack by this place turned into a juke joint. We know at the end of the movie, which I won't talk about, that they knew that the people who bought it from them would try to take it from them. Those are that's the same agenda that Remick has. Like, I'm going to take it from you. Like this line, I didn't notice it till the second or third watch through, when they're like, we're going to kill every one of you tonight. And that is presented as some sort of liberation, right? And it is this hunger to consume. And I think this is part of what Coogler is saying, that the American experience for African Americans has always been, you are here for our consumption. And that shows up in slavery. It shows up in characters like Mary. When we talked about that before, they mentioned in the movie Jim Crow. They mentioned sharecropping in the film, that you are here to feed our consumption. Even the language of the church, we will paper over it to get you to accept that for yourself, or the language of relationships. So we know what happens in the third act, how the juke joint is compromised, right? It's just the leveraging of relationship to, like, oh, you care about your children, right? And so we will even use that. So, I mean, the metaphors are so thick in this movie. Like, I really can't remember any other film that is doing this much in virtually every line and in every character.
I want to come back to, or I want to spend a lot of time on the nature of evil as assimilation or consumption or appropriation. But the most pointed line for me comes in the description by the Irish vampire. Long ago, the men who stole my father's land forced these words upon us, and it's the Lord's Prayer. The thing about the Lord's Prayer, and you guys will know this, but I don't know that the viewers may know it, is it is itself spoken first by an oppressed individual. There is an imperial force that has occupied his land, and he has decided to become a revolutionary and to stand against it in a nonviolent, aggressive way that subverts the empire in all of its symbols. And the fact that even Jesus' words have been taken over by this kind of power. And I don't know that it's not white people, and that ends up being, I think, a really great image in this movie about, it's not about white people, it's about something else. That those who have been abused have themselves become the abusers, or those who have been stolen from are themselves now stealing, or those whose culture has been appropriated are now becoming the appropriators. That needs to be, I think, forefront in coming to these into the movie. That seemed to me the dominant thing. What I really wanted to talk about off this was how much time is spent on black spaces. Mm-hmm. And I think until we see like the imagery that Coogler wants to demonstrate of black spaces, I don't think that the theft that is in the heart of evil here comes across as cleanly. So I'm very curious about your thoughts on this, Sean. But the movie starts with a land purchase, and as Mike was saying before, like the idea of these guys, World War I vets, they fought in Chicago, made a bunch of money, but they know
or stole a bunch of money.
Yeah,
it's unclear.
Oh, there you go. I hadn't thought about this, but they know that they can't own something without like violent defense of it.
Right.
At some levels. The imagery that hit me is threefold. There's the rows of cotton versus the organic forest imagery. There's the interpretation of the timber mill as a juke joint versus a place of execution. And then there's just how music flows into all these spaces.
And then Mary also refers to the timber mill as not a juke joint later, but a slaughterhouse.
Yeah. And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Why are these floors? It looks like these floors have been cleaned. Is an early line.
Yeah, what was on them?
Exactly. Go ahead. So I'm really curious about how you saw black spaces and what that would even mean in the context of this movie.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, just the history of it, especially the history of Mississippi and the American South, is that a space could become a black space if it were a space that white people no longer wanted. Or they knew that what happens explicitly in this movie is that they know that they can reap financial reward from selling and then retake without fear of reprisal from any sort of legal or judicial authority. And so it's like they're willing to do this because, what does he ask at the beginning? It's like, why do you boys want this? And the answer he gets from Smoke and Stack immediately is like, it's none of your business, right? But like the presupposition, and we deal with this still in a lot of ways, that white authorities think that minorities owe them an answer for doing things that white people do all the time and don't have to have a response for. Like, why do you want to do this? Or why do you want to do that? Or whose permission do you have to do this? Well, like, I don't have to ask your permission. And like the question is racialized from the beginning. The only question is like, I don't go to the local grocery store and buy a steak and the checkout girl asks me, why do I want it? One, she doesn't care. And two, like, it's none of her business. But in that place and in that time, and still in a lot of other spaces, black space can only exist if it is okayed by white authority.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening there. And what happens when Remick shows up, like, they don't know that he's a vampire, but their response is like, this place isn't for you. And because we know what happens when we let you in. So, and I've even seen this in ministry context where you've got, I remember a couple years ago working with an organization that I was on the board of, and there were these white churches that wanted to kind of help out. And what they asked for in return for their financial help was, hey, give us a couple of board seats, so that we can be dialed in. And our executive director at the time was like, no, because we know what happens. Like, you give us money, you get board seats. And then what has historically happened is that you leverage your money and board seats to then tell us what to do with this space. Because you're like, well, we don't know that we're going to be able to continue to support this effort. And that is so prevalent that, one, our board knew about at the time, but also lying under the cover of, why can't Remick come in? Like, they heard the music. I mean, think about this. You got a public place. We heard the music. It sounded great. We want to come in. No. Right. Right.
Well, which is one of the reasons that it makes the vampire metaphor so, perfectly on point for the manner in which the story is told, because, like, and if you don't know the rules of vampires, like, they can't come in unless you invite them in.
Turn there.
And so, there is that tension of, this space is ours, but Remick and they've got this fancy gold coin, and are we going to compromise? And at what point in time does then that open up this whole, Pandora's box that we did not anticipate, because we thought, naively perhaps.
And what's powerful about that, Mike, is that it's right on the heels of someone trying to buy a drink with wooden nickels. And so there is a conversation about whether or not we're going to take these wooden nickels because we're running a business, and Remick shows up with gold. You've got the two brothers, one sympathetic to the community. This is all these people have. The other, hey, this doesn't pay any bills. And so there's a built-in tension about whether or not they should be invited in. But there is no discussion that these people will not come in, because we've seen what they will do. And how incredible is it that in this movie that Ryan Coogler just assumes that we know vampire rules. Because I knew exactly what I was like.
We're all good. We don't need a
to be
primer.
Vampires have to be invited in. Like, never invite anybody in your house just because you don't know that, you don't know if they're a vampire or not. So just keep yourself safe.
The monetary side, I think, is huge, and it's understated. Here's a part that is understated. I think this actually is, if you give power to the money, that is the loss. And that's where that tension is. That conversation is really important at that level, I think, because once you do make it about money, then you go somewhere else. I don't know if it was, I'm trying to remember if Annie ever charged for the stuff that she was doing in her home.
She did. There was a girl there, if I remember correctly, right before, and they were having but I don't think she charged full price.
It was
there was a negotiation, but that negotiation was built in community, right? So money is what you have to have when you have decided to not have community.
Let's go there. I love that. That's a good thought.
Or stack, teaching the young woman there in front of the store to negotiate. Like, no, we're talking about money now. Like numbers have to be in dialogue, conversation with one another.
Like, Annie's much more concerned that this girl's mother get what she needs than her getting the full return. And that's one of the tensions with Stack and Smoke and Annie too, is that the economy that they're working with is a little bit different. And when you are a oppressed community, and I know this from seeing my parents and grandparents, like, you're constantly negotiating those things, but you're negotiating them in good faith.
Yes.
Right. Like, I'm going to do that. Like, yes, I can do this. I can take a loss here because you are part of my community. And what happens when Remick shows up at the door is that he's not a part of their community, and he is part of a population that has historically screwed over their community. So no, you can't come in. The people, it's a trust economy. The people who are inside are people we can trust. When you can't come, if you are denied entrance, it's because we don't trust you. Not because you're a vampire. We don't even know that yet, but we don't trust you.
Something Lewis points out in Screwtape is that there are two types of unions that can take place, that one's demonic and one is divine. The divine love of, I want to be yours and you want to be mine and we are united, is a beautiful, natural, this is part of the function of a human being. The way that demonic perversion of that is I want to consume you. I want to eat you. I want to devour you. And in family, we don't devour each other. We are each other, and we are like there is that language of finances because of how it's even wisdom and inviting people to become more mature, but that's not how money has worked with the gold coin. It's, I'm coming in to pay so that I can devour you. And that was the undercurrent. It struck me as, like, when pointing towards what is actually the evil here and why vampirism is so helpful as a metaphor, is that it's showcasing how that works in human cultures.
No, and it's clear, it's Remick there for Remick in these vampires, and clearly, like, for whatever reason, he happens to be the head of this hive mind of sorts. Like, he clearly has a position of dominance, but when he's over Sammy at the end, and he says, I want your stories, I want your songs, I want your narrative, I want who you are. It really reminded me of a scene in Get Out when the blind man played by Stephen Root, who has won the auction to take over Chris's body, and he says, don't lump me in with those, like, I don't care, black, whatever, like, I want your eyes, I want what you see through, I want your cultural experience, this thing that I can't access, that I can't own, that I can't hold, like, I want a shortcut into this this authenticity of this lived experience that can only come, and I think the voice of the blues would be the same. Like, it has to come from a place of oppression, and you're saying that I can't own, my piece of the oppression. Like, and he even wants to relate it to, his, and that's where some of that metaphor gets so dense, and I need to, bone up on my Irish history, but there is that experience of having been lorded over from his homeland as well. And what is happening now? Like, they're just reliving. They're acting out that trauma upon another community in a weaker position, just like, we always seem to as
well, I mean,
beings.
we lost, right? Like, we lost to this greater power.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing we know what to do with is to assimilate that same kind of power for ourselves, because everyone hates losing. So let's just do that to other people, which is vampirism, right? Like, this evil that happened to me, yep, I am going to do to other people. And not only do to other people, I've got an insatiable hunger to do it and think that they will be better off once they become what I am.
You'll never live in the light again.
Yeah.
Down that path. One of the overtones that really jumped for me was the language of equality in this movie as the avenue to devouring a culture. And I thought that was really brilliantly placed, is the pivot toward using equality, insisting on equality. Is it's a Trojan horse, in this movie. And just as a side note, I thought that was a wonderful example of tactics here for the vampires and how that would play out in our culture. In terms of losing and winning, I'm real curious to just jump to the end, and we can kind of jump about, but to jump to the very end. And they've shown we're in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, make sure you stay into the credits. Yeah. The movie is not over.
But Michael B. Jordan is in Kid and Play attire. I'm curious on that front. Has he become, in that scene, has he become the evil that is opposed in this film? And how did that express itself? Like, when you see those two dressed up as they are in their hearts, what do you see?
They're incredibly sympathetic, I think, at the end.
I do too. That's interesting. Go ahead.
And it's almost like, this thing happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
This is now how we have to exist. But he has some agency because he hasn't sought out Preacher Boy. And so they are doing what they have to do to survive. There is a sadness about, that was my last sunrise. That day was my last sunrise. Yeah.
Last time I saw my brother.
Now you are trapped. They are both trapped in this existence forever. And I thought, there are worse things in the world than having to spend your eternity with Haley Steinfeld, I would imagine. Like, I'm just guessing.
We can ask Josh.
I mean, it hasn't helped the Buffalo Bills this year.
Probably why.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not having a great season. But at the same time, you're just like, oh, this is a trap, which actually, this very eschatological question for me, because nobody wants to die, but does anyone want to live here forever? Right. Like,
well, I mean, what is Sammy's response? So Sammy is now in the body of BB King, and so he is he has lived this long life, and he's playing the blues in Chicago, and they come to him, and what does he say? Because they said, no, we can fix this up for you. You don't have to die. You can stay with us and remain and keep playing. And these are these two characters who have clearly they've learned how to continue living in between worlds in a sense. And what does Sammy say? I think I've seen enough of this place. Like, he's ready. And I think you get that eschatological hope there of someone who continued to live out this authenticity of his passion and giftedness in a way that you could argue really continued to bring life to the world. And then you have the counterpoint in Smoke and Annie. You know, so Annie has befallen to the vampires, and Smoke, true to his promise, has killed her before she was turned. And then in his dying moments, he sees this vision of Annie and their departed infant in her arms, and she's breastfeeding, and she says, you know, you put that cigarette out, you can hold him. I don't want to get on any of that smoke on him. Calls him by his name, Elijah. I don't want to get that false name.
That's a good call.
On him. And there is this moment of just peace and transcendence, and that transition into this life that is that is the grace note of the film. I mean, it is very much in that pose of Annie and child. Like, that is the redemption that came through this, and you do get a sense, I think, that Stack and Mary have had a sense of that along the way. There is there is the loss that comes with, we chose this, well, it chose us, and we get the benefit, but also we have to, what does Annie say? The soul gets stuck in the body. It can't rejoin the ancestors. It's cursed to live here in this world with all this hate.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like that's such a great line, and it jumped off the screen and rewatching, and like there is this question: is living the life that you love and were intended to live better than living here forever? And Preacher's answer is yes. Like, I did the thing. I lived the life that I wanted, that I was designed for. And Annie's like, with all of this hate, it's just not worth it. She wants to be reunited with her ancestors and with her children. And so, like, there are worse things than death.
Truth.
Right? And I think he's holding that. I think Coogler's trying to ask that question. Life on Earth is worth living, but is it worth fighting to continue for? For the individual. Not like, should we blow up the planet with nuclear weapons? Is there a particular beauty into? I mean, I'm writing a book about this right now, so I don't want to give away the title. But like, is there a particular beauty about doing the right things at the right time for all of your life and being content with whatever that expanse is?
What you're naming there is that when you embrace that story, that narrative for yourself, that actually is immortality. The vampire version is the false shadow replica of what it looks like. This is one of the things that fantasy continually comes back to is the fake images of immortality. So like Lord of the Rings does this quite a bit in terms of showing who is it that's actually alive and is a flourishing immortal soul versus who has just become a wraith, who has become a shadow, who has become the golemized element of themselves. And so, like, one of my favorite, again, a Lewis quote, one of my favorite ideas is that all of the tyrants look identical to one another. There's no distinction between the tyrants. You look at them and it doesn't matter what country they're from or what age they lived in. They're all the same damn guy. But the saints are gloriously different. And all of the saints that you look at and name who they are in the world, the colors that come forth that make them very singular in their moment, that's what it looks like to be yourself in time, living out your narrative, the story that God's given you in your place, and that resonates through the ages forever. And that kind of meditation for me comes, even though I don't think that's what Coogler's point is here, it's still the case that that's what really emerged in my heart of, again, all truth is God's truth. And the music is such a, and I want to end on talking about music, and maybe we could talk a little bit about how sex is used in this movie, because I think it's interesting. But the way that music moves here is music itself has that type of power of its time, yet it is connecting to the things that really have base, that have body, that have truth to them, and are drawing us into it, and it becomes the place of healing because of it.
Well, I want to piggyback on something you said right before the music
Yep.
about Lewis. And we know this even from the business world, right? That greatness is idiosyncratic. And things that are average are just average. Everyone who is great at anything is great in a unique and particular way.
Love that.
And so I just wanted to drop that in because I think there is something of what Coogler is saying about expression through Preacher Boy and not accepting the expression of his father.
Yes.
And not accepting the curtailing of expression from Smoke and Stack. This is like, there is, and yeah, you know, the three of us are wired in a particular way, but in each of us, there is like, I would die. Mike would die particular. Like if we could not express what we thought and felt and that would be understood. And it doesn't have to be understood by everybody, but it's got to be understood by enough people. Like that is like, if you want to shut me down, put me in a circumstance routinely where I cannot express, right? And I think that's part of also what Coogler is saying about racialized systems in the South, that it not only like it also suppress expression. So, which is also what Remick wants to do. Like, while it seems like it spreads, expression spreads, you know, now I know everything that your husband knows and he's speaking in a different language. And like, it seems like it gets disseminated, but the expression is only disseminated insofar that it could be used as power over and against for a group of people who will no longer express anything individually ever again.
Which is one of the reasons that it's so important, Sean, that, and I learned this from you, and, you know, talking about, we were talking about your growing resistance toward films and media centering around Black drama, right? Because I mean, the examples are just so numerous, and less so are these films and stories truly centering around Black joy. And I think, you know, what you get that in the, you know, it's in the end, you know, as Sammy is talking to Mary and Stack in Chicago, and we see the montage of the events leading up to the, you know, to the juke, everyone arriving, everyone cooking together. Like there's so many beautiful moments there. It reminded me of similar scenes in, like, you know, Black Klansman. There's in Spike Lee's film, there's a wonderful...
Do the Right Thing is all over that.
Yeah, right. And, you know, Lovers Rock, the Steve McQueen, you know, part of this 5-film series was all about this community that and what happens when they get to express out of that purest sense of joy. All the while, I mean, the score is just to get back to the music there. Ludwig Göransson, the composer, and also college roommate of Ryan Coogler, is just a fun piece of you know, trivia. But the score is tremendous in kind of all facets. But it's you know, you wanted to talk about the music piece, Jeff. I'll hand it over to you.
Well, that I found the fact that it was scored by a white man really interesting. I didn't know this until afterwards, and it brought a different flavor to everything. And obviously, Göransson has worked on a handful of Coogler's projects, Creed, Black Panther, and Sinners, but has also done stuff with Childish Gambino and another movie about oppressed people. The movie about he did the music for The Mandalorian. The use of the music throughout just bring in so much of the language of Black culture for the rest of us. And for me, the moment where the movie really turned was when the beautiful Irish music all of a sudden came in, and it became a different movie for me at that moment. It wasn't actually the showcasing of the generations. I thought the showcasing of the generations through music I felt like that was the movie I was destined to finally be in, just because I kind of knew about the movie. But it was the move towards the Irish singing their songs of pain and struggle and celebration, and even some of the Black vampires are with them in that moment as well. I found that moment showcased what he was trying to say about music as the place of identity and healing and longing. That was, we haven't talked about this yet, but the longing for something really comes out. And I think a lot of the characters here, longing for freedom, longing for what, I don't know what they're even longing for it sometimes, but it's that rich fullness of life, but it comes out for me in that scene.
Yeah, there's definitely the shared language of lament, but also, yes. I mean, I find it a little heartbreaking that, you know, in that step dancing sequence, you know, you've got all of those who were at the juke, and you've got Stack and Mary, and they're no longer singing their songs. They have now joined this other chorus.
But am I wrong in saying that music is meant to appear beautiful in the movie? The director wants you to think that it's beautiful. And that goes against the expectations because these are vampires. So how does this work?
Yeah, I mean, there is not. There is a beauty still to them, even though that they have been robbed of their souls, and that could be easily the image of God in every human, but this twisted darkness that takes over, that they lose control. I think the music, it's interesting because I don't think Coogler wants you to hate the vampires.
Yeah.
And I think that scene toward the end is part of that. He's not saying you should become one. And there's a lot of critique about vampirism, but that they persist to the end as victims themselves.
Correct.
Which brings me to the question that you talked about, that you mentioned before, about how sex is used in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot remember a mainstream movie in my life that talks about cunnilingus as much as this movie talks about it.
I have a theory about that.
Okay, so I'll give you my theory, and then I would love to hear your theory, because it's about vampires. I mean, this is a constant source of conversation in the movie. Like, crazy amount.
Yes.
But you're talking about vampires, and this is a use of the mouth that does not consume. And it is a use of the mouth in the area of the body where there is bleeding, which is what vampires want. And I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to take from that, but it seems to be a juxtaposition of what the vampires want, and a kind of strange, not that there's anything inherently wrong with it, like the strange purity, because that very act takes so much trust and risk and openness to the other. And so I'm not sure exactly where he's going, but there are some shades around it where I can kind of see what he's trying to say by that being such a persistent conversation in the movie. And so where one vampires are extracting from a source of blood, the other conversations around it are bringing pleasure to the source of blood. Am I crazy?
No, I think power dynamics about race are all over the movie, but power dynamics about gender are not. And it struck me that the reason that there's so much oral sex in this, specifically male on female, ends up being that sex is a service. Sex is seen as I'm giving to you without receiving in the traditional way, as opposed to some forms of sex that especially when males use sex for exclusively their own pleasure at the cost of the woman or in disregard of the woman. And it seemed like that's what was being communicated there, because as was said, it's just there's so much of it. You got to be bringing this in for some reason. That was my take, but you got thoughts, Mike?
My response there, I think, would just be a matter of the sexuality in this film is yes, frank, but I would say that it is passionate and consensual and embodied, and I think that it is very much about communion until it is about consumption, when the vampire is then involved. Like that for me is like the main shift of that is it just continues to underscore the beauty and all that is beautiful about humanity in our fullness, and that then being debased and twisted by the nature of this curse that leaves us in this place of only hunger. We talked about that with
I do want to say, like, it's not me saying it; it's Ryan Coogler saying it, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and I think it's a part of the movie that is interesting. I mean, it's just so fascinating. Like, one of the reviews I saw that I read right after I saw it the first time was someone just the review of their whole movie is that America's not ready for how much cunnilingus talk is in this movie, and like it's really like he's really leading with it for some reason. It is not incidental. So if I could ask him one question, if I could ask Ryan Coogler one question about this movie, it would be like, why so much? Because it's not used. Right? Sex is often used in movies to curtail the love process. Like, we don't have falling in love with someone takes a long time. We need a shorthand for telling you that these people care about each other. So we'll just throw them in bed together. Like, that's often just a shorthand. But that's not what's happening here.
There's a depth of intimacy in terms of how Mary's character is approaching Stack, in terms of like almost feeling betrayed because you showcased how much you cared for me by engaging in this kind of sex with me. It was your service towards me, your care for me, treating me as something of real value is all over her brief language about this up front when she comes and confronts him for not being around.
Yeah, and that's not what happens later in the film when she attacks him. So I mean, it's Coogler's doing something there. I don't know. Maybe he needs to get together with Ridley Scott and they can talk about their strange idiosyncrasies that just keep coming up in movie after movie.
You guys are prudes.
I'm glad
That's
to
my
be
take.
a prude. I will wear it, my prudishness, faithfully.
I actually would bring in somebody who we haven't talked about yet, especially to talk about the finale here, and that's Tarantino, who himself has some fetishes that get on screen occasionally. The Tarantino ending to this movie, and I think Tarantino's kind of all over this movie as a real influence, not just the vampires, but like the vengeance. I don't think that's. I come back and forth in terms of like what I wanted out of the ending of this movie, because the true villains aren't, as was said, aren't the vampires. The true villains are I assume, are the clan that get taken down by a World War I vet and his.
Well, I mean, and they both could be. So some get taken down at night, and some get taken down in the day, but in the same place.
Sure. Any thoughts on, does that bring any meaning or value to this film, the way that the slaughter works at the end?
For me, I mean, having seen the film, a few times now. I mean, I have seen it said that there is the final kind of action set piece that leads everything to its climax being a little bit unsatisfying from a like action film standpoint, and I can see that take. But I think that between the vampire horde coming in, it all happens really quickly. I mean, that happens quickly. The encounter with the clan the next morning happens pretty rapidly. You get the sense that this was not the element of the story that Coogler was most passionate about telling. Like, I think that is clear narratively, but it is because, and I think that this is where I land on the movie's side in this regard, is it's not quite yada yada through, but it is just matter of factly, this is what happens because of course. Right. This is what happened. Of course. From the moment this began, everyone involved was doomed.
Right.
Like, we knew that the clan was coming in the next morning. This was always a night that was meant to be only this one night, because what else could, to act as though it was anything else is untrue to the setting in which it takes place, the time in which it takes place. And that's part of the tragedy of it, and what we know what is lost in the exchange.
Just as dangerous as the vampires are these men who congregate outside the juke joint to kill those who are inside it. What I like about it is Coogler doesn't spend a whole lot of time on that because exactly like you said, Mike, of course, no one is shocked by that. But it's one of these films that the more you watch it, deeper might not be the right word, but the more it's working on you, and you could just sort of, let me go down this rabbit hole, and why would this happen, and how does this connect? And I've even thought about adding it to my all-time brothers list of movies, because there is a dynamic that's happening to the brothers, even twins, who's like, you're my big brother. Like, big brother by minutes, like that's not really a thing, but there is that dynamic as well. So it's, I know it's going to go up against one battle after another, and probably Begonia and some other films coming out. Thankfully, the Bruce Springsteen movie isn't what everybody thought it would be, but it's got to be at this point, from what I've seen. And we're just now entering the Oscar season. This has got to be the front runner far and away for me.
That's a good word. Last thing for me, and it's coming out what you're saying, Mike, is that I hadn't really thought about how much the movie emphasizes the value of the temporal versus the rejection of these, what I want to call the eternal, but that's wrong. Like the lasting, it's the ownership that the white Southerners feel they have over this property, and like just how thin and lacking of value that is. But the image of this one night I was free, this one night I danced, this one night I felt alive. I don't know if that's the entry point to eternity, but last thoughts from you guys?
Well, let's talk about just one thing from Miles Catton, who plays Preacher Boy. First movie, just crushes it. So props to him.
Tremendous.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, the performances, those will be enduring. Miles Catton, Delroy Lindo, one of them will have I think a shot at Best Supporting Actor. I would love to see Wunmi Masaku and supporting actors, but it's going to be all over the place. I mean, just the editing, production design, the music, the cinematography, down the line. This is a film of impeccable craft, and that is a rarity, especially creators of color, given this kind of platform, and so that should be commended and celebrated. And Coogler struck this very there's been a lot of talk about this deal made with Warner Brothers, that the rights to the film will revert to him in 25 years, essentially, which is, I think, so beautiful, given that the theme of the film is all about not just whose stories are told, but who has control over their own stories. And so for him as a creator to have worked through the studio system and the Marvel system, and to come out and to have crafted a original story that gets to be told on this scale, this is why we go to movies. So I hope that continues to be the case, and that more directors are given a shot to take their swing, because I think that our experience collectively and our avenue into various kinds of stories and storytelling modes, we all become more human as a result. And it's not about the assimilation of a hive mind. It's about celebrating that within the diversity and the distinctiveness of our experiences, like, we happen upon the universality that really binds us, deep down.
Concluding question for us, Mike.
Yeah, we last time we just let's do a couple of recommendations. What to watch now? We know it's hard to get to the theater, so we all wanted to bring some recommendations to pass the time. I'll start real quick. I've got 3 and maybe a bonus. So and they're all kind of thematic. So if you're interested in the effects of a hive mind on your populace, I got a show for you. It's called Pluribus. It's from director Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, on Apple TV right now. I am loath to say anything more than that, but the first 2 episodes are up now. It is a really brilliant premise that is very much in line with the world we live in today. On Netflix, you can see True Grit from 2010, the Coen brothers. the masters. Like these are my like Ecclesiastes filmmakers, because they are all about digging into the heart of meaninglessness and trying to, find some sense of virtue. But Haley Steinfeld of Sinners, Oscar nominated for her supporting role. It's actually a lead role anyway, but in True Grit, Coen Brothers Western with Jeff Bridges. The other, The Alabama Solution, is a documentary on HBO. And if you want to get a sense of how these themes continue on, this modern day slavery that is played out in our system, our prison system. This is a really stunning and disquieting and just, I mean, it's not a light watch. It's a documentary filmed largely from cameras that are, from inside the prison system in Alabama, as these men are all trying to expose this broad level abuse and corruption that continues to happen. I've been doing some surveying with the prison ministry here in Houston of late, and I find it quite telling that you drive through 5 miles of cotton field in order to arrive at the prison, where it still very much is a work camp. So this is, the world of Sinners remains the world of ours today. And bonus, Apple TV, Mr. Scorsese, a 5-part documentary about the greatest living filmmaker, Martin Scorsese. And if you're listening to this, clearly you are interested in the crossroads of faith and film, and there is no better voice on that topic than Marty. So that's what I got.
Excellent.
You got anything, Sean?
Yeah, just a few. So if you're into even post spooky season, I commend to you everything Mike Flanagan that you can find: the series Haunting of Hill House, Midnight Mass, Fall of the House of Usher. I also recently revisited A Quiet Place for spooky season. But I would say this, Delroy Lindo, if you want to see Delroy Lindo from Sinners at his absolute box office-y best, give Gone in 60 Seconds a rewatch. If you haven't seen Nicolas Cage, you should just visit. That is a fun movie, and you get to see Delroy Lindo just be Delroy Lindo. So if you enjoyed him in Sinners, there you go.
Not enough Delroy talk. We apologize.
I'm jumping in and trying to swim in contemporary stuff, but House of Dynamite kind of didn't quite land the plane for me, so I can't recommend it very much.
We won't be doing an episode on House of Dynamite, no. I don't suspect.
I continue to just love the hell out of documentaries recently, because they kind of take me out of this moment in time and try and have informed my perspective on the moment that I'm living in. So I've been going through the CNN Decades series, which is really fantastic. They just do the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they break it up into pop culture and politics and movements and technology in particular. Went through the 80s recently, and just their storytelling of Silicon Valley and how the movement into the digital age is just really fascinating on one front, because I suppose I didn't understand how that all works, but it informs what we're experiencing now with just how much is taking over with AI and the rest. And that's just been a stabilizing thing for my mind and heart, which I've kind of really needed right now, is just so getting into these histories and I continue to just consume Civil War stuff. Anything before we sign off?
No, we'll be back. Throw us a review or a 5-star rating. Helps other people find us. I'll just do that quick plug. All good.
At some point, I've heard tell that we may jump into movies of the past.
Like and subscribe is what I would say.
Sean Palmer, Jeff Cook, the Movie Mike Yeager. See you next time.